Chapter 208, For the Future 3. Changing wasn't easy, but there were small steps I could take to start. The first thing I needed to address was sleep. I needed to increase that. Let me quickly check how many hours a person usually needs to sleep in a day. Opening up the browser and quickly searching, I got my desired result not long after, but the answer I received was an unexpected one. 7 to 9 hours, are we serious? Wasn't this a little bit too much? That was like 2 to 3 to 4 hours wasted. There were so many things that I could do in those hours. No, relax, this might just be wrong. Let me open up another page. But, same. The answer that I received was the same, and my question went from how many hours did a person need in a day, to is 5 hours of sleep healthy? I was starting to get desperate, to the point where I clicked on every page that I could find that sounded remotely like it would agree with me, but none of them did. Fuck. Regardless of what page or search I made, the answer was the same. The ideal amount of sleep was 7 to 9 hours. Anything below that was not healthy and manageable. Looking at the results, I struggled to accept the search, but in hindsight, it sort of explained all of my headaches and constant fatigue. It's also very likely one of the contributing factors for me forgetting something so obvious like the compass. It did say that not sleeping properly impaired thinking. I sighed. It really looks like I'll have to force myself to sleep more. I didn't really want to do that, considering how much work I had, but given my most recent expedition, I understood that this was necessary. In that case, what else can I do? The goal was to improve in every aspect. I didn't want to make the same mistakes as before. I had to be ready at all moments. For that, I started to research more. To improve both mental and physical health, it's essential to maintain a balanced diet and engage in regular exercise. I paused there. That sounded like a hassle. It wasn't like my diet was that bad. Sure, there were a lot of instant noodles, and maybe a few too many prepackaged lunches from the store. Pasta too, pizza. And shit. I groaned out loud. Thinking about it, my diet was also crap. But wouldn't that mean that I'd have to start cooking? No, God, that's even more time wasted. No, wait. I suddenly recalled something. The guild had a dining hall. Most of the people in the containment sector didn't go there, but as far as I was aware, they provided extremely healthy and nutritious food at low prices. In that case, I could eat there. The problem was something else. Exercise. Just the idea of exercising made me sick. Not only did it feel like a waste of a few more hours, but thinking back at the pain that would come after. I really didn't want to. But the more I didn't want to do it, the more I knew I had to. This wasn't just about my general health. It was also to help me better deal with the anomalies. With better physical strength, I'd be able to run faster and just overall not get tired more easily. In that regard, exercise was also vital, and I added that to the list of things that I had to do. What else? I started thinking about everything that I needed to do, and one thing came to mind. Right. It had something to do with the section chief and his interest in my games. If I can somehow convince him to use my games as training tools for the recruits, then maybe, just maybe, I can also ask him to help fund their development. My heart sped up at the thought. The guild is extremely rich. If I were to somehow impress them with my games and convince them to use them, then I can also convince them to invest in me. But since my games only affected those of the second order and below, the budget wouldn't be too big. It can affect those of higher order, but they'd need to be from different departments and have little to no experience in dealing with anomalies. It became awfully clear to me how important experience was when dealing with my games. The more experienced someone was, the less likely they were to be scared. After all, those with experience tended not to follow the script that I had envisioned for them. Well, that's a starting point. I needed funding more than anything, not because I needed SB, but because I needed a team. It became painfully clear to me that I needed a team in order to churn out my games. I couldn't do it by myself, especially not when I needed to take some time to build some experience and learn more about this world and the anomalies. With enough funding, not only can I improve the games and have a team, but perhaps I can also start messing around with VR. VR was still uncharted territory for me, something I had no clue how to navigate, but I was certain that, if handled right, it could elevate my games to an entirely new level. That being said, that was still far into the future. The main priority at the moment was improving my health and developing my multiplayer game. Once that was developed, I planned on going to the section chief and talking to him about potentially funding my games. Actually, wouldn't it be better if I went to him tomorrow? If I can get some funding for a temporary team, I can churn out the multiplayer feature faster and be able to secure funding faster. Yeah, I should do that. I wasn't aware of how interested the section chief was with regards to my game, but since he had shown a little interest, that was enough for me to give it a try. Okay, I guess this is everything that I need to do going forward. It'll be troublesome, but if I want to live longer, then it's absolutely necessary that I follow the things that I said. I stood up from my seat and checked the time. It was around 10 p.m. Just about the right time for me to go to sleep. However, just as I was about to leave, my gaze fell on the box again, and I was reminded of something. Right. I paused the moment I caught sight of the box and pressed my lips together. I've got 2 tries, but I'm still not entirely sure about how it works. There's a certain someone that I want to give this new ability a try with, and it's not like it's going to be a waste since this directly aligns with my interests. Moving towards the box, I picked up the red ball and stared at it. Now, how exactly do I make this work? Was I just supposed to show it directly to the person? Frowning, I went back to my laptop and did a quick search on my target. CEO of Nova Studios. Right, it should be this guy. I carefully stared at the image in front of me. He didn't look particularly handsome. In fact, with his balding head and pot belly, he was anything but charming. Staring at him and then the ball in my hand, I started to ponder how to send the ball to him, when... swoosh! The ball directly faded from my hand. My eyes widened in shock, especially when a notification appeared shortly after. Would you like to start haunting? Play button yes, no. What? Wait. Staring at the notification in front of me, I was left stunned for the briefest of moments. However, I quickly snapped out of it and pressed yes. Ding! Requirements for haunting not met, please try again. The ball reappeared in my hand again. What sort of bullshit was this? It had clearly asked me just a moment ago if I wanted to haunt or not. And yet, it was now telling me that the requirements hadn't been met. I quickly opened the chat box and typed, "What are the requirements for haunting someone?" Pressing enter, I waited for an answer. I really hoped for a response. Each passing second stretched on endlessly, dragging for what felt like forever. But then, you must have direct contact with the target. Direct contact with the target. Wait, does that mean that I have to meet them directly and interact with them in order to haunt them? My heart sank. How in the world was I going to interact with the CEO of Nova Studios? No, it's not entirely impossible. I could just approach them directly, ask for a meeting, and say I'm interested in working with them. But before committing, I'd like a tour of the studio and a look at how things operate there. This seemed like an appropriate approach, but at the same time, it also felt a little troublesome. It would mean that I'd have to travel again. Musing over the situation for the next few minutes, I had a sudden thought and typed it in the chat box. Are interactions through video call acceptable? Pressing enter, I waited yet again for an answer. This time, I received my answer not too long after. Yes, it is acceptable. Yes. I clenched my fist and pumped it in the air. This made things so much easier for me. Taking out my phone, I scrolled through my emails and found the email from Nova Studios. I tapped on their address and started a new email. This time, I explained that after doing some research, I'd decided to give them a chance. I expressed my interest in having an interview with the CEO to discuss my potential future at the company, and that I wanted a direct call to talk things through in more detail. This shouldn't be too bad, right? I looked at the mail. It looked pretty formal. It does look a little desperate, but it doesn't matter. I'm not really planning on entering a studio like that. I've already suffered too much at my old studios. In fact, thinking about them, I wondered how they were doing. Nonetheless, this was something for me to check out later. I was already wasting too much time on this stuff. It was time that I got my 7 hours of sleep. I thought about doing 8, but that was simply too much. All right. Standing up from my desk, I packed up my stuff and left the office. The next day, a strange scene occurred at the guild early in the morning. Going to the gym early in the morning was a normal routine for guild members. They didn't just do it to build stamina. The higher their rank, the more essential it became to strengthen their bodies. The stronger the body, the more power one could extract from a node. Kyle, Zoe, Rowan, Miles, and several others arrived early that morning, as usual, ready for their daily workout. But today an odd figure appeared. Am I seeing things? Most likely a ghost. It is a ghost. Kyle and the others had to double-check to see if they were seeing things. However, even when they rubbed their eyes and saw him still standing before them, they realized that they were really not seeing things. What? Pausing at the entrance of the gym and staring at the others, Seth frowned. Why was everyone looking at him so weirdly? In the end, it was Kyle who approached him. What are you doing here? Are you looking for me? No. Seth shook his head. He didn't really need anything from him. Kyle's expression faltered for a moment as he looked around before pausing his gaze on Zoe. Then do you need something from her? No. Rowan. No. I'm here to exercise. I'm not here to look for anyone. Impossible. Seth paused upon seeing the expressions that everyone was giving him. Kyle in particular looked as though he had seen a ghost as he moved forward, trying to reach for his forehead. Stay still for a moment, Seth. I'm trying to see if you've got a fever. No, stop, I'm fine, just stop. Moving away from Kyle, Seth looked at everyone strangely. What's so weird about me wanting to exercise? I just thought it was good for my health. Kyle covered his mouth, mumbling things to himself. This doesn't make sense. Seth caring about his health. Is the world ending? He spoke in a voice loud enough for Seth to hear. In the end, Seth turned his gaze away from Kyle and moved toward the nearest machine. Taking out his phone, he checked it. This should be a bench press machine, right? He wasn't really sure. This was the first time he had seen it. However, looking at the bar and the weights by the side, he felt that this was what he was looking for. Wait, you're seriously not lying when you said you wanted to exercise? Why would I be? Seth sat down on the bench and leaned back, pressing his palms against the metal bar. As he did, Kyle's head popped up from above. What are you doing? I'm spotting you. As a first-timer, it can be pretty dangerous if you do this without someone supervising you. Oh. Seth nodded and pulled the bar up before bringing it down. Try doing 10 repetitions. If it doesn't feel heavy, we can increase the weights. Sure. Seth brought the bar down and followed Kyle's instructions. In a matter of 20 seconds, he was already done with 10 and put the bar back. So, how was it? Kind of light. No, more than light, he didn't feel anything at all. Not bad, then we can add a bit more weight. Let's add 5 kilos on each side. Okay. Kyle grabbed the 5 kg weights and put them on each side. He then positioned himself behind the bar like before. Try again. If it's too much, we can stop here. Seth tried again. But nothing. He didn't feel anything at all. It was almost as if he were lifting air. Nothing, not bad. You're stronger than I thought. Let's try adding 10 kg on each side. Okay. Kyle added 5 kg on each side again, and Seth started again. Even then, he felt nothing. It was still incredibly light. The hell? It had gotten that even Kyle was surprised. You're stronger than you look. It wasn't like what Seth was lifting was heavy, but for someone who had never exercised before, this was impressive. Should I increase it? Oh yes. 15 kg on each side. Still nothing. Nothing. 20 kg on each side. Now, 25 kg on each side. 30 kg on each side. Later. Before Kyle and Seth knew it, the bar now had 40 kg on each side. Neither of the two said a word, while the others in the gym had also stopped to stare in their direction. None of them could believe what they were seeing. This included Seth as he stared at the bar in front of him. I'm feeling it a little bit more now, but since when did I become so strong? He may have been a newbie, but he wasn't stupid enough to not see that the weights he was benching were ridiculous for someone who had just started. Was this because he had reached the second order? Did reaching the second order make his body stronger? Or was it something else? Something like, could it be related to my decree? Was it possible that the Shepherd decree didn't just stop at allowing one to collect anomalies, but also absorb their properties? I think this is my limit. With a soft groan, I placed the barbell back on the rack and took heavy breaths. Kyle stood behind me, his gaze somewhat dazed. 45 kilos on each side, that's... He looked shocked. Not only him, but looking at the others, I could see that they were also shocked. Wait until he realizes that this is still not my limit. I estimated that I could do 60 kg on both sides, maybe more. However, it was best for me to stop here. The fact that I could lift this much was already shocking enough. I didn't want to stand out any further. The rat's presence, silently watching me, only reinforced that instinct. This is crazy. Staring at my hands as I slowly clenched them, I couldn't help but marvel at my own strength. It was far beyond anything I'd expected. Was this really because of my rising order, or was it the effect of my decree? I already had the book that Kyle had given me. It was time that I gave it a proper read. I needed to understand how this was even possible. Did you really not train before? Taking off the weights, Kyle looked at me suspiciously. I find it hard to believe that a beginner like you can lift so heavy. How did you manage to lift so much? It wasn't just Kyle that felt this way. Looking around, I could feel several gazes looking at me with the same skeptical look that Kyle was giving me. I broke out in cold sweat in that moment. No, relax, this isn't impossible to explain. There were plenty of excuses that I could come up with, and as my mind churned, I looked at him and shrugged my shoulders. I don't really know myself, to be honest. I've never been to the gym, but that doesn't really mean that I don't exercise. I do, but in the office. Generally, that is what keeps me awake whenever I'm tired. I just do a bunch of push-ups. I guess that accumulated over time. This excuse. It wasn't exactly terrible. However, it was also not exactly the best. But thinking about it, Kyle didn't really have a choice but to believe me. So what if he didn't believe me? I was fairly certain that he already suspected that there was something wrong with me. Even then, I was also somewhat confident that even if he tried to check me, the result wouldn't yield a thing. In fact, there's a good chance that he already had me checked during the hospital. I truly believed the system was deliberately hiding whatever powers and the cognitive shard that I was carrying. The fact that even the section chief didn't notice anything weird with me kind of proves it. In this regard, I didn't have to be too cautious. Later. Kyle stared at me for what felt like an eternity before turning his attention towards my arms. His brow rose. Now that I think about it, you're surprisingly fit. I am. I looked at my arms. Looking at them now, it did seem like they had become a little bigger. I rolled my sleeves up and stared at them better. Oh wow, you're kind of right. It wasn't anything spectacular, but my arms were certainly a lot bigger than before. I guess you weren't lying. Kyle moved next to me and poked my arm. It's not bad. Wait. I pulled my arm back. Kyle didn't look at all bothered as he squinted his eyes. You take steroids. What? I pointed at myself and then looked at my arms. If this was the result of steroids, then I had certainly been scammed. They were far too small for that. Plus, do you think I can afford them? Haha, it's fair. Kyle laughed before patting me on the shoulder. I guess you have a point. I'm impressed. I'll let you train in peace. If you have any trouble with any of the machines, you can just ask me or the others. I'm sure they'll help you if you ask. Yeah, sure. Looking at the others and seeing them look away from me, I silently shook my head before taking out my earbuds and putting them on. As the music drowned my mind, I leaned back against the bench and started my next set. 1, 2, 3. By the time I was done exercising, it was 8 a.m. I stayed for exactly 45 minutes before heading back to the dorms for a shower. As I walked back into the guild and found my way towards the lower floors where the containment department was located, my body felt like it had been torn to pieces. My chest, to be precise, I could hardly move it. But strangely, for whatever reason, my mind felt clearer, sharper than it had in days. Perhaps exercising wasn't really that bad. I also need to better understand if the sudden increase in physical strength comes from the order rank up or my decree. I should spend some time to learn more about my decree. But before that, I stopped right before a certain office. Okay, this is it. I took several deep breaths to prep myself for the inevitable. I had already recited everything that I needed to say the day prior. Taking another deep breath, I brought my hand forward and was just about to knock when... Clank! Luck! The door abruptly opened, smashing against my face as I took several steps back. Did I hit someone? Blinking in confusion, the section chief's gaze eventually fell on me as our gazes met. Then, as if realizing what had happened, he pointed at me and laughed. Keck, that's pretty funny. No, it wasn't. It fucking hurt. What's going on here? Coming right after him was a woman with short black hair, deep hazel eyes, and a mole close to her eye. She was quite beautiful if I had to say so myself, and I did recall seeing her once, but I couldn't quite recall. I think I know you. She also did seem to recognize me. However, just before she could recall, the section chief cut in. He's the guy I've been speaking about before, our trauma counselor. The section chief moved next to me and patted me on the shoulder. Very talented one. He then looked at me. This is team leader Soren. He then looked at her. This is Seth. Then, before anyone could get a word out, he looked back at me. Are you here to ask me to join the main group? If you are, I can make it happen in a heartbeat. No, thanks. The smile quickly faded from the section chief's face as he clicked his tongue and pulled his arm away. What a pity. Seeing how fast he switched up, I was left speechless. However, I tried my best not to mind it as I took a small breath before looking back at him. I am here for something, though. If it's not about joining the main team, then I'm not interested. It's not, but it's about my game. Game? The section chief blinked his eyes, his mind slowly processing the situation. Then, as if suddenly recalling, he smacked his hand against his open palm. Right, there was that. My mouth twitched. So he only remembered now that I mentioned it. This meant that nothing had been done about my game. It wasn't like I didn't expect this, but it was still disappointing to know. I sighed to myself. But then, games, why are we talking about a game? The woman with shoulder-length black hair suddenly spoke, alternating her gaze between the two of us. Her eyes then narrowed as she looked at the section chief. Don't tell me. No, it's nothing about what you're thinking. Then, the section chief stopped her before she could continue. He then turned his wrist and looked at his watch. Well, there might be some time. As he mumbled to himself, he looked at me and then her. Then, after a brief pause, he headed back into the office. Come inside for now, I'll show you. The screen flashed. A notification appeared shortly after. Game cleared. A pair of hazel eyes stared at the screen in front without blinking. The room was silent as I stared at the team leader, with my lips pressed tightly. Is this supposed to be scary, fun? Even though I had seen firsthand how she managed to clear the game in record time without even blinking once, seeing her confused and bored expression still made my heart tighten. More or less, the section chief answered while leaning forward to stare at the cleared sign on the laptop. He then looked at the time and whistled. That's even faster than my time. You tried it too. Sure did. The section chief replied. Not too long ago, actually, Kyle showed me the game and told me that we should use it to train the new recruits. This game? The team leader looked at the screen and then at the section chief. Her expression said it all. It looked as though she was looking at a lunatic. Why would you want to give this to the new recruits? It'd be a massive waste of time. Yup, I think so too. My lip twitched upon hearing their conversation. Even though I knew my game wouldn't affect those with a high order, it still stung to hear them say how unscary it was. The game is scary, all right, it's just that, well, you guys are different. The look on the team leader's face turned even stranger. If you think so too, then why would you consider using this to train the new recruits? That's because Kyle insisted that it managed to scare Rowan alongside the recruits from the other departments. Hey. The team leader paused, her brows slowly furrowing in doubt. Did you say that Rowan got scared? I was also confused, but that's apparently the truth. Really? The team leader turned her attention back towards the game and started it again. This time, she played the game more slowly, but even then, she was still able to clear it without much effort. I mean, I wouldn't say that the game is terrible. The storyline is quite great, and I like the mechanics of the monster. I can tell that it's inspired by Vial 1071. Vial 1071 was the official classification for the Twisted Man. I also like how by the end of the game you realize that the investigator is actually her latest husband, and that this was all planned by her to trap him and turn him into another creature. It's a nice twist, but it's not really that scary. She leaned closer to the monitor and sighed. Then again, this could be because I'm different. Since it is confirmed that Rowan got scared, then it might actually work. MHM. The section chief nodded his head a couple of times. I'm also thinking the same. In the end, they both turned towards me. The section chief spoke. You'll hear about the game, what do you need? That. Feeling both gazes, I felt a little nervous. However, thinking about my current situation and how desperate I was for money, I laid everything out for them. I'd like some funding. If you can provide me with some funding, then I can hire a temporary team and enhance the game further by providing a multiplayer feature. With the multiplayer feature, I believe that it will create a better environment for teams and will also serve better for training. The section chief and the team leader both looked at each other. Then, with a frown of his own, the section chief opened his mouth. How much do you need? Taking into consideration that I might need them for a week, and that they need to be rather experienced, I'd say maybe 50,000 to 100,000. This was the best estimate that I could come up with. While adding the multiplayer feature wouldn't cost too much money, I wanted to properly enhance the game even further. I wanted to improve the graphics, the voice acting, and everything. If you can grant me the funding, I can improve the game in all aspects, and then you can start giving it to the trainees to train. I felt quite nervous while speaking. At the end of the day, the amount of money that I was requesting wasn't very little. It was quite a lot, in fact. Furthermore, neither of the two had any incentive to invest that much money in me. After all, the two didn't find the game scary, and if the game ended up not working with the trainees, then it would just be a massive waste of money. I was nervous that they'd reject. But 50 to 100,000, that's not that bad. You're right. If it's this little money, then it's worth considering. I don't think it would make that much of a dent in our budget. Plus, you did say that Rowan got scared. If it really works, then it might actually help us out a lot. Hearing the conversation between the two, I was left speechless. It wasn't like I didn't hope that they would agree. However, I thought that things would be much more difficult. And yet, staring at the two as they were casually chatting, I realized something. The amount of money I asked for is really nothing to them, isn't it? I really wanted to laugh at the moment. But before I could do that, the section chief walked up to me and patted me shoulder. I'll send you the money over. Work on your game and then send it over to us. I'll have it tested with the new recruits. If you really can manage to scare them and provide a good way for them to train, I'll consider giving you even more money in the future. My eyes lit up in that moment as I silently clenched my fist. Yes, this was exactly what I wanted. I had to do my very best to keep my expression firm while slowly nodding my head. Understood, I'll get to work immediately. At it. The section chief slapped me on the back, nearly making me spit out in pain. However, suppressing the urge, I walked towards the door and left. As I did, I couldn't hold my excitement. I'll get to work immediately. I'll make sure not to waste this opportunity. I couldn't wait to see the new trainees' trauma, gathering funds. I couldn't wait to gather funds. Nova Studios. There was 1 week left until their newest game, Blade in the Dark, was set to release. Following their aggressive advertising and secret workings, there was a lot of hype revolving around the game. Puff. Taking a drag of his cigar, CEO Malone sat with his legs on the desk as he cracked a smile. He was currently holding onto a piece of paper where an email was printed. So you're saying that he wants to work with us now? That is correct. Ha. Cracking a laugh, the CEO dropped his legs down as he placed the paper on the table. How laughable. He's obviously realized that his game is no longer doing well and is now looking for our company in order to look for a stable job. You are correct. Matthias, the chief manager of Game Oversight, stood on the opposite end of the desk while lifting his glasses. Ever since we've taken action, the game has sold less than 5,000 copies. Right now, it is hardly selling more than 100 copies in a day. Ha. The CEO laughed once again, his laugh coming out rather hoarse, most likely from all the tar built up in his throat. Tracing the lines on the paper, he looked back at Matthias. He says he wants to have an interview with me. Do you think I should give him one? I think it's worth a shot. Since he's submitting to us, we might as well take him in. He's rather talented. The CEO's eyes narrowed as he looked at the paper. In the end, he agreed. You're right, it would be a waste to let go of such talent, but... He paused, a smile tracing his lips as he slid the paper forward. Change the terms from before. Since he's refused our first offer, it's only natural that the terms won't be as good. As he said this, the CEO took another drag of his cigar before chuckling. Puff. He won't refuse since he's already in our hands. Oh, and regarding the interview, I'm not going to be bothered to attend. You take care of it. Subject: invitation to Nova Studios and meeting confirmation. Dear Mr. Thorne, we at Nova Studios would like to extend our warmest invitation to visit our studio. After reviewing your email, we are pleased to inform you that we are still very much interested in moving forward with you. Additionally, our CEO has agreed to a direct meeting to discuss potential collaboration. Would 7:00 p.m. today be a convenient time for you? Kind regards, Nova Studios. Today. Staring at the unexpected email, I didn't know how to reply. I checked my schedule, and seeing that there was nothing else that I had to do, I replied with an okay, sounds good to me, but in a more formal way. Well, that's that. I could more or less predict how our conversation was going to go. They're either going to be overly formal or immediately condescending. I'm also willing to bet they'll try to lower the terms they originally proposed. I was all too familiar with bullshit studios like these. It's whatever, it's not like I'm planning on joining to begin with. There was something more important at the moment. Staring at my phone and seeing the notification, you've received $100,000, I could barely contain my excitement. It took everything I had to keep it together. Okay, let's not waste time. With this money, I planned on immediately improving the game. After a lot of research and testing, I realized that I didn't need to worry about the game being developed by others. The special softwares could still be added right after the game was developed. In this regard, hiring a temporary team that could help me with the development of the game was rather easy. There were many websites that offered freelance work from experienced members. All I did was select the top 10 programmers available and messaged them with the same message. In short, I needed help from them, and I was willing to pay them to work with me and form a team for a week in order to help establish a multiplayer feature into the game. If possible, I also wanted to improve other aspects of the game. That's 10, I should be able to get a response in not too long. Once I was done sending them a message, I leaned back onto my chair and stared at the ceiling of my office. Drumming my fingers on the table, I looked around the place. The place looks much better after I cleaned it. There were no more papers scattered across the ground, and the smell was also gone. I had turned on the ventilator and sprayed some spring breeze all over the room. With that being said, the room was rather plain. Besides the painting on the wall, it lacked any real decoration. Should I get a TV? It was more so to contain Mr. Jingles. With a TV, Mr. Jingles would be able to stay there at all times and watch over the place. Well, I'll think about it more later. For now, I should focus on gathering funds and developing the game. Lifting my head up, I turned my attention towards my computer. My eyes lit up when I saw a response. Opening the mail, I clenched my fist when I saw that one of the freelancers had accepted the offer. They did ask questions about the game and how much they'd receive, but they appeared to be on board. I quickly replied to them before getting another notification. Another acceptance. Good. My eyes lit up with excitement. Things were starting to look up, and in the following several hours, I spent most of my time managing my emails while addressing any questions from the freelancers. I could tell that a couple of them were on the fence about the project, but I knew I had to remain patient. The pay was good. I didn't see why they'd reject such a job. Before I knew it, the time for the interview with the CEO of Nova Studios had arrived, and the ecstasy I'd felt earlier had settled considerably. So far, I've gotten 8 responses. Most of them are neutral, but there's hope. There are 2 left, but even if they don't plan on working with me, I think I've got enough people to help me with the game. I didn't even need that many people to begin with. However, in order to ensure the best possible upgrade, this was a necessary step. Aim. Clearing my throat, I turned my attention towards the monitor in front of me. As I did, I reached for the nearby box and grabbed the red ball as I fiddled with it. I'll put you to good use today. I waited right until the clock struck 7 before calling. DRR. The line rang for a couple of seconds until a figure appeared before my screen. Hello. He looked entirely different from the CEO that I had seen in the photo. He was a lot slimmer, and with his hair parted to the side and glasses, he looked a lot more refined than the CEO in the picture. No, this isn't the CEO. Hi. I still nonetheless answered. My name is Matthias, and I will be conducting the interview. If you are ready, then we can begin. His voice was rather firm, carrying a professional tone. But that is something wrong. Matthias raised his brow, looking at me questioningly. I quickly snapped out of it and shook my head. No, nothing in particular. I was just a little confused. I thought I was going to be having an interview with the CEO. Matthias gave a nod of understanding. Yes, that will happen. However, first, I'd like to interview personally. I tried my best to hide my frown as I slowly nodded my head. Sure. This wasn't part of the email, nor what I had requested. However, in order to get what I wanted, this was necessary, and so, after quickly calming down, I began answering every question that came my way. How long have you been developing games for? About 7 years. Have you worked for another company before, one in the same industry? Yes, Nightmare Forge Studios. Oh. Matthias paused, looking a little surprised. They're not bad. Any reason why you left them? I was fired. There was a short pause in the moment as Matthias's hand paused. In the end, he continued. Any reason? A lot of layoffs due to the most recent failure with their game. I see, that does make sense. Following that moment, Matthias began to ask me even more questions about my experience in the industry and all my achievements. I answered all without much of a struggle. Some answers were even half-hearted. I never really planned on joining their company, so there was no need for me to try very hard. The entire interview didn't last very long. It lasted for about 10 minutes before Matthias lowered his writing pad and looked at me. All right, this is enough for the questions. While we're not entirely satisfied with what we've managed to gather, you'll still be a great fit for the company. He then smiled. I'd like to formally greet you at Nova Studios. Welcome. Ah, yes. I stood up for a moment, but then recalled it was a video call and sat back down. Matthias looked at me weirdly before speaking again. A contract will be quickly sent to you by email. If you could please sign it, we'll have the process ready. But... Pardon. Matthias paused while looking at me. Is there anything wrong? Didn't we say that the CEO was going to be here? When can I meet him? Oh, right. As if recalling his previous words, Matthias smiled. The CEO is busy right now. I'll have him get in touch with you when he's free. You'll also meet him once you're here. This motherfucker. He never planned on letting me meet with the CEO from the start. I nearly flipped my desk over. It took every part of me to hold myself back as I stared at the man in front of me. In the end, trying my best to remain calm, I asked, just out of curiosity, what exactly is your position? May. The man looked a little confused by my question. But in the end, he still answered. I'm the chief manager of game oversight. I take care of all the matters regarding the games that come out of our studios. Is that so? I fiddled with the red ball in my hand. Yes, that's correct. My position may not be as high as the CEO's, but if we're strictly talking about the games, I'm the one who managed them. The CEO's job is more about attracting investors and managing the firm. Hello. I pretended to look surprised while clenching the red ball in my hand. You'll do. The ball vanished the moment I squeezed. Ding! A notification appeared shortly after. Would you like to start haunting? Play button yes, no. I smiled at Matthias while pressing yes. In that case, I am very satisfied. Ding! Conditions have been me. You have begun haunting. Target Matthias Silverstone. I'll give you some time to review the documents. Please let me know if there's anything missing or if you're not okay with the terms that we've established. In that case, I'll have to excuse myself. There's a lot of work that I must tend to. I understand. I will give you an answer after I review the document. Great, I hope to receive a positive answer. With a smile, Matthias ended the call. The smile quickly wiped off his face shortly after that as he checked his watch. That lasted longer than I anticipated. In general, he was somewhat satisfied with the new recruit. He looked docile and someone who would listen to orders. He always appreciated such pushovers. It made his job easier. With that being said, the fact that he got laid off by Nightmare Forge Studios is quite worrying. Perhaps he might not be as talented as I anticipated. He suddenly felt that the decrease in terms was more fitting now. The new recruit was going to see them soon when he reviewed the contracts, and he was probably not going to be happy about them. But it didn't really matter. Matthias smiled while thinking about his reaction. In the end, he'll still end up joining the company. Matthias was confident about that. His game was no longer doing well, and his subsequent games were also going to fail. Of course, this may come as a result of their actions. Nonetheless, Matthias was going to make sure that he'd have no other choice but to enter their company, and the more he delayed, the lower the terms were going to be. I do hope he drags a little bit longer. This way we can pay him even less. Chuckling to himself, Matthias closed down the laptop and stood up. It was just as he stood up that he noticed something hitting his foot, and as he lowered his head, he noticed a small red ball. He bent over to pick up the ball. It was squishy, with a long line tracing the middle. Squishing it a couple of times, he tossed it in the bin next to him. He shook his head as he did. Looks like the cleaners aren't doing their job properly. He proceeded to head to work right after that. This was going to be a busy week. I sat in silence, staring at the long contract in front of me. It wasn't like I didn't expect it, but reading the terms that were presented in front of me, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anger. This is even more ridiculous and exploitative than my previous company. Not only was the salary reduced by half of what they had originally offered, but I was now required to work a minimum of 12 hours every single day with only one day off. What sort of contract was this? In fact, how is this even legal? The worst part of it all, this was actually still a little bit better than my previous company. It's a good thing that I'm not desperate enough to join. If not for the system, I had a feeling that I'd be forced to take an offer like this. Closing down the laptop so that I wouldn't see the contract for any longer, I leaned back on my chair and sighed. My anger didn't just stem from the fact that the contract presented to me was extremely exploitative. No, that didn't piss me off that much. I had more or less guessed that something like this would happen. The part that truly pissed me off was something else. It was the fact that the CEO had blatantly ignored me despite the promise in the mail. For a brief moment, the entire interview felt like a total waste of time, as though I were being toyed with by the company. I could feel my blood pressure slowly rise with each passing minute that I spent on the interview. Thankfully, I was able to remain rational enough and found a new target. In hindsight, I may have chosen the best target. Like Matthias said, the CEO was only in charge of gathering sponsors and managing the company. The one who was truly in charge of the entire ordeal was Matthias. In that case, he was the best fit for the haunting. I don't know how long I'll have to wait for the haunting to take effect, but I'm sure it won't be long. I looked at the notification in front of me. Matthias, 10%. Do you wish to send Mr. Jingles? Play button yes, no. It didn't explain much, but somehow I understood. The percentage indicates the level of hypnosis, while the second part is self-explanatory. The greater the percentage, the more hypnotized he will be. I pressed no for now and looked at the other items on the box. Touching the wig, I tried to send it over, but right as I did, a new notification popped up. Cooldown 23:59. So there's a cooldown. I should have seen this coming. Nodding my head, I put the wig back into the box before tucking the box under my desk. I'm in no hurry. I can wait a couple of days until I can increase the percentage to a level where I'm satisfied. Checking the time and seeing that I still had some time, I decided to check my phone and answer any questions that the freelancers had for me. In the end, I spent the next 2 hours like this before it was finally time for me to head back to the dorms. As I packed my laptop into my bag and left the office, I was greeted by the sight of the section chief. Oh, good timing. It looked like he was looking for me. You should have received the money by now. In any case, you said that it will take about a week for you to program the game, correct? Yes, about that much. If everything went well, yes. Good, good. In that case, there's a perfect opportunity for you to showcase the ability of your game. HM. I paused for a moment. What did he mean? The guild has recently hired a batch of new recruits into the department. There are not many, about 10, but considering how we've lost quite a few, this might not even be enough. Well, either way, they're all quite talented. I'd like to use your game to train them. If all goes well, we might start using your game to train the recruits. Oh, and, the section chief paused, looking at me with an ambiguous smile. A special guest will be coming. A special guest? Who? That'll be a surprise. The section chief chose to remain on the ambiguous side, as my leg twitched. He's not a little ghost boy, he's not a little goes. Wait, no, that's wrong too. That's all from me, I just wanted to tell you this before. Wait. I stopped the section chief before he could leave. HM. He looked at me curiously. You need something else, I thought the budget was. No, it's not that. I cut the section chief before he could go on a tangent. Not that, then. I took a deep breath, trying my best to suppress my rapidly beating heart. It's worth asking, it's not like you'll fire me for asking. Staring directly at the section chief, I asked, is it possible for me to enter the gates by myself, or at least with some supervision, or just look at the general operation? I'd like to gain more experience. I tried my best to hide the trembling in my voice as I asked the section chief for this request. I was somewhat afraid that he'd reject me, but as I slowly raised my head to look at him, I found a large and creepy smile marring his lips. In that moment, I shuddered. The reason why I asked the section chief to send me to the gates was simple. I wanted to build up experience. Be it through watching tapes of other teams or entering the gates, I wanted to build more experience. I had become painfully aware of how my naivety and lack of knowledge in this industry had nearly cost me my life. Working on bettering my sleep and diet was just one part of the main problem. In order for me to survive, I needed to build up experience. Especially if I want to tackle high-level order missions. Let alone the conductor quest. I only had 6 months in order to clear a 4th order quest. How in the world was I going to be able to handle that? I was really screwed. The only way I could see myself beating that was by somehow clearing the conductor quest. But that was easier said than done. I really shot myself in the foot back then. Not that I had much of a choice. Are you serious about wanting to build up more experience? Hearing the section chief's voice, I felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over me, especially when I saw that unsettling, almost creepy smile still lingering on his face. I really am starting to get second thoughts. Nonetheless, regardless of how I felt, I still ended up nodding my head. Yes, I'm pretty serious. I sighed. I feel like after the most recent incident, if not for Kyle and Zoe helping me out, I wouldn't be walking here. I also know that regardless of what I do, I'll end up facing a scenario like this again. In that case, I might as well just try my best to build up experience so that situations like that don't repeat again. The section chief's smile turned a little softer. That's a good mentality to have, although the one that actually saved you was Miles. You should be grateful to him too. Oh, right. No, fuck him. The section chief crossed his arms and tucked his hand under his chin, seemingly falling into deep thought before looking back at me. Well, if you're truly serious about this, then I suggest joining the next batch of recruits coming in next week. You'll be the 11th member. How does that sound? It'll give you the chance to be right alongside them and learn the ins and outs of the industry firsthand. That makes sense. Great. The section chief smacked me on the back, his smile larger than ever. Yoke. This time I couldn't hold my groan. Bastard. I'll leave you to it then. I've got quite a bit of work to catch up on. I wish you the best of luck with your project. I can't wait to see the results of your work. The section chief was like a storm. He was unpredictable, and he came and left as he wished. Seeing his departing back, I scratched my back several times before shaking my head and going back to my dorms. Fucking hurts. I better get some sleep. There's quite a lot that I need to get done tomorrow. At the same time, just thinking about the fact that I'd have to hit the gym again tomorrow sent a sudden wave of nausea through me. I really didn't want to go. The next day came faster than I wanted it to. Despite sleeping more than I usually did, I didn't feel like getting out the bed at all. This was a first for me. It hurts. But the moment I turned, it was like my chest erupted in flames. Just the tiniest of movements hurt like hell. The pain was quite a lot, and yet I knew that I had to get up. Thus, with a groan, I got out of bed and got changed for the gym. By the time I got there, I received the same stares I had gotten on the first day. I ignored all of those and did my exercises before going back to my dorm, where I took a shower and headed back to my office. As I did, the first thing I did was check my mail. That's less than I expected. I had originally expected more replies, but I only received 2 more. I spent the next hour looking through my emails and looking at other websites for freelancers. By the time I was done, I found myself on a private chat with 3 individuals. A couple ended up bailing out on me, and these were the only ones who were willing to accept the job offer. I frowned. This doesn't make sense at all. It wasn't like the job was bad or it paid low. Why was everyone so hesitant? Well, whatever. The first thing I did once the group was created was insert several contracts. This was, of course, necessary. I couldn't have them leak anything. Not that I care too much. Even if they do end up leaking, they won't be able to replicate the effects of my games. It was still necessary for me to create the contracts and send them over. Poke tilde. Stop it. Feeling something poke my cheek, I quickly swatted it away while looking at the chat in front of me. Poke tilde, poke tilde. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Hold it in, hold it in. Poke tilde, poke tilde, poke tilde. I clenched my teeth and turned my head, only to see a tall, shadowy figure standing beside me. Its long finger was extended, slowly pressing against my cheek. Pukes tilde. I don't want to wrestle you, at least not now. I pointed at my work. I've got work, maybe later. Ever since that incident in the past, the Dreamwalker had developed a sort of addiction. It really liked to wrestle with me for some reason. To make matters worse. Fight, fight, fight. Popping out of the painting, Mile raised her hand and pumped it in the air. Fight, fight, bait him. Not now, later, also whose side are you on? Boo-oh, fight, beat him, Blackie. I clenched my teeth and tried my best to ignore the chaos around me. But as if those two weren't bad enough. Squeak, squeak, squeak. A sudden squeaking sound echoed out loud, and when I turned my head, I saw Mr. Jingles hand a horn to Mile as she suddenly started pressing it loudly. Squeak, squeak. Fight, fight. I looked at the sight in shock. Since when did the clown get along well with the others? No. I squinted my eyes. Looking at the way the clown was looking at Mile as it handed her even more stuff, I suddenly shuddered. This clown. It was a massive pervert. Leave her alone, she's not the same little girl that you're supposed to make happy. Later. The clown looked at me before ignoring me and handing Mile a small red ball. Wow, what's this? Mile grabbed onto the ball and squeezed it a couple of times. She quickly lost interest before tossing the ball away. At the same time she did, I watched how the clown's shoulders hunched as its bright red colors almost seemed to turn gray. It looked sad. PFTT. I couldn't help but laugh. But I probably shouldn't have, as the clown looked back at me. I shuddered then and raised both hands. That I'm Mr. Clown. At that moment, Mile clung to the clown, her crystal eyes locked onto its face, and just like that, color began to return to its body. Shit, it's really a pervert. Poke tilde. Feeling another poke, I suddenly glared at the Dreamwalker. I'm working, let me. I want chips, can you get me some chips? Squeak. The clown pressed its horn as if signaling to her that it would. That was when I paused and looked in their direction again. No, you already had 3 of them today, stop it before. Poke tilde. Later. Poke tilde. Later. Poke tilde. You wanted to fight, right? I closed my laptop before looking at the Dreamwalker and rolling up my sleeves. Forget fighting, this is a life and death battle. I picked up my chair and swung it at the Dreamwalker. Die. Bang. This wasn't bonding. This was me setting things straight. I hope this message finds you well. I am writing to formally outline my requirements for the upcoming week. The deadline for the tasks is set for 1 week from today, and there are several items that will need to be completed within this timeframe. I will provide a detailed breakdown of the specific tasks shortly. Please let me know if you have any questions or require clarification. Task requirements. Multiplayer integration. Graphics and visual enhancements. Shadows and lighting system. Physics overhaul. General polishing and optimization. File game demo exe. This is the game file. I will be working alongside you during the process. Noah stared at the message in front of him. He drummed his fingers over the table before looking next to him. Did you get the same message? Yup. Same here, it looks legit. 3 people sat at separate desks positioned around a rundown apartment. Empty cans were scattered across the floor, and each of them wore hoodies, their hair messy and unkempt, as if they hadn't slept in days. But this wasn't far off from the truth. The 3 hadn't gotten much sleep over the past recent days. With the deadline for rent upcoming, and all 3 of them with no money to pay, they scrambled for the past several days to find a job they could each work on. The job market was ruthless. All 3 had been laid off by their respective companies and hence decided to work freelance together. But even that proved rather disappointing for them. Demand for freelance programmers was quite low, especially with the rates they asked for. It was also then that a mysterious opportunity came. It involved something along the lines of helping the requester to improve their game. The pay was decent, but the offer wasn't exactly appealing. Tight deadline, solo developer, and so on. A lot of the freelancers were in it to improve their CVs so that they could be hired by big companies. Despite their disheveled appearances, all three were highly experienced programmers. The moment they saw the message and launched the game, their expressions shifted instantly. What in the world is this mess? I wouldn't call it a mess, but I can certainly see that this might need a lot of work. And it's only the three of us working. Looks like it. The three groaned at the same time. If they could, they'd all probably quit. And yet, it wasn't like they had much of a choice. The money was good, and they were in desperate need of money. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess, Noah muttered while ruffling his hair. The other two nodded before Ryan, the man sitting by Noah's right and sporting a black hoodie that hid his messy dark hair and green eyes, suddenly spoke up. Before starting on the game, let's test it out ourselves. I can see that it's configured for LAN. It'll help us get a better idea of how the game works. You know what, that's not a bad call. Joseph responded, pulling down his white hoodie to reveal long blonde hair that framed his face and complemented his sharp blue eyes. As he spoke, he absent-mindedly massaged his short beard. If we get a better idea of how the game works, we might be able to work faster. All right, Noah replied, running his hand over his ginger hair. It's a good call. He quickly opened up the game and put on his headset. The others followed along with his example and booted up the game. Their first impression of the game. It's somewhat bland. For a solo developer, this is pretty good. I guess I know why we got hired. It was a mix of good and bad. Either way, the three quickly linked up with the multiplayer feature and frowned. The sync is not good, there's lag between each action. I can see it. I'm taking note of it so that we can fix it later. None of them felt the need to criticize any further. They had been hired for the specific reason of improving this aspect. The moment the game started, they quickly locked in and started analyzing everything. The shadows are inconsistent, and the graphics can be improved. Take note of it, Ryan. Got it. The lighting also needs work. MHM. The old lady needs more syncing. Her eyes aren't aligning properly. Agreed. Slowly but surely, the three started to find out everything that was wrong with the game and put it down in their notes, be it sound or visual aspects. They took note of everything. As they did so, they completely neglected to take care of the clues. And then, are you three so busy with work that you can't pay attention? A certain voice whispered in their ears, and the three of them stopped. Immediately, their gazes fell on the old lady before them, and their breaths paused. But only for a short moment, as they looked at each other and smiled. That wasn't bad. Pretty good. That got me. The three resumed their game, but this time, for some reason, they moved more slowly. An unknown tension began to rise between the three. The darkness that embraced them seemed to expand, the shadows formed by the light of their PCs slowly starting to flicker in their direction, slowly and steadily suffocating them. They moved carefully. They followed the instructions. But even then, bar thump, they couldn't quell the rapid beat of their own hearts. And then, they caught a glimpse of a certain something. It left as fast as it came, but they saw it. Long, tall, top hat, pale. They shuddered. Their breathing quickened. Don't look at it, that was the rule, don't look at it. And why yes? Wait, I think I found something. Ryan's voice quietly echoed. Noah and Joseph turned. But a pale face greeted them, its long and twisted smile staring at them. Tyler. Shit. Screams tore through the room. Keyboards flew and so did cans. Noah and Joseph found themselves on the floor before they knew it. Ryan wasn't faring any better as their screams startled him as well, and he jumped back. Fuck. Stepping back, his eyes continued to linger over the screen. Thump. A certain thumping sound echoed in his mind. It wasn't his heart. It was something else. Something. Boo. A pale face appeared on the screen, and Ryan jumped up in fright once again, throwing his headphones away and falling back on the ground, his entire body shivering as his back was drenched in cold sweat. Hi. The collective sound of heavy breaths echoed within the confines of the room as the three looked at each other. But then, their eyes glimmered at the same time. It was at that very moment that they understood. They weren't just dealing with a simple game. They were dealing with a potential industry-changing game. Their eyes twinkled at the thought as they jumped back into their seats. Quick, let's play the game again. Take note of everything that is wrong. Regardless of whether you get scared or not, take note. Yes. This game. It was a massive opportunity for the three of them. If they managed to implement the right adjustments and improve the game significantly, leading it to sell like hotcakes, they would directly benefit as the programmers who contributed to its success. This was their chance to succeed, and they didn't plan on wasting it. And as such, for the next week, neither of the three got more than 4 hours of sleep. Cans piled up in the room as the three worked their bodies to the bone in order to perfect the game, and just a few hours before their deadline, they were done. All three stared blankly at the game before them. A large start game appeared before them, but neither of them pressed on it. No, it was more like neither of the three dared to press on it. The game. It was no longer something that they were willing to play. At this moment, the game had jumped to a whole new level. One where they felt it was in the best interest of their hearts to not play. The week passed much faster than expected. Waking up early each day to hit the gym, I found my body growing increasingly stiff with every passing morning. My muscles were screaming at me each time that I woke up. It really made my life more difficult. Even bending over to pick up a piece of paper felt like the most difficult task in the world. Today was no different. Groaning as I struggled to sit down on my seat, I felt my legs nearly buckle beneath me as I almost rolled back onto my seat. Damned leg day. Taking several deep breaths, I tried to calm myself down. Today was the deadline that I had given to the programmers for the game. The four of us had been working together on developing the game, and while I had left most of the stuff to them, I had also been doing some stuff myself. I didn't just sit idly and wait for them to finish. I had been adding more pieces around the game to give it even more tension. I've also been thinking of perhaps adding extra features to the game. I did have an extra 100,000 SP in my balance. There were quite a few software programs that I could purchase as a result. However, I held myself back in the end. I think it might be possible, but I'm not sure to what extent. The main thing that I wanted to do was add a hypnosis-type feature, one that felt similar to Mr. Jingles. I had done my basic research and was aware of what type of decree Mr. Jingles belonged to. He belonged to the illusionist decree. It was one of the many decrees that existed. In essence, for those in the illusionist decrees, there existed a thing called anchors. They were essentially small placeholders that were used to slowly hypnotize one's mind. In Mr. Jingles' case, it was his clothing. They served as essential placeholders, gradually allowing access into the target's mind. The deeper the infiltration, the more effective the hypnosis became. This explained a lot of things. In particular, Matthias, 75%. Do you wish to send Mr. Jingles? Play button yes, no. If I activate the skill now, I think the hypnosis will work. Ideally, I wanted the degree to be at 100%. However, from what I managed to read, anything above 50% was good. The main downside of those in the illusionist decree was that it took a while to set up anchors. But of course, hypnosis wasn't their only skill. That being said, taking out the book about orders and decrees, I flipped over the pages to look at all of the decrees. I had been studying all of them for quite a bit, and the thing that troubled me the most was one thing. Shepherd Decree. It wasn't in the list of any of the decrees mentioned. In fact, it wasn't even mentioned at all. It was almost as though it didn't exist at all. How weird. I tapped on the book while pondering over the matter. I should try to probe Kyle about it, he might know something. But then again, I was soon going to be joining a team within the guild. Perhaps I might learn more about the different decrees and whatnot later. I had an inkling, though. An inkling that the Shepherd Decree wasn't something that existed. This thought only grew louder with the passing of time. But then, ding! I received a sudden notification on my laptop as I looked at the screen in front of me before smiling. Game Demo EXE. Looks like they're done. My new and improved game was finally done. Opening up the file and looking through it, I froze. This was beyond anything that I had expected. Not only had the graphics improved drastically, but I could feel that the movements were a lot smoother. Wait, hold on. To make matters even more impressive, as I moved the mouse, I could see the old lady tracing my movements with my eyes. Hehe, is something the matter, officer? Even her chuckle felt more vivid and lifelike. I guess it really was a good idea to hire a proper voice actress for this. I had previously used AI for her voice. Now the interactions with her were smoother, and she felt even more real. As I moved around the game, I also realized that she was a lot more involved in the game. With the addition of the voice actress, there were a lot more interactions with her. But there was a problem. Would the software work even with her voice? I bit my lip and placed the file in the game developer system. I then loaded the software. Whispering fog. Type software. Description: a visual effect, fog, that appears in certain areas and carries whispering voices that mention the player's previous actions or thoughts. Effect implies the game is observing the player. The whispers could escalate over time, repeating things the player shouldn't have said out loud. Rating 1.5. Price 19,000 SP. This was the same software that I used in order to get the old lady to interact with the players. The way that I used it was rather simple. What I did was reduce the visual effect of the fog at all times and log each thought into the system. Whenever a specific phrase or thought surfaced, and it matched the pre-configured script that I had set up in advance, it would trigger the old lady to speak, giving the illusion that she could hear them. It worked out great so far, but there was now an issue. I previously used AI for the voice, so it wasn't much of a problem, but now that I'm no longer using AI, how will the responses come out? I paused for a moment. A certain thought occurred to me. Actually, this might not be bad. There was simply not enough time to get the same voice actress to recite the prescripted lines for the mind-reading part, but it wasn't necessary. Rather, it was best to use AI. If her delivery has that robotic, AI-like quality, especially when reading lines meant to stay buried in the mind, it could make her voice feel more forced, more unsettling. That might actually make the game even scarier. The voice didn't even have to be robotic. Lower, perhaps. No, it just has to be different. I had to highlight the fact that her voice was different in those moments, so that it truly gave the impression that she was listening. Yes, this is definitely an upgrade. The coding and adjustment for this part didn't actually take much time. In fact, it was rather easy since it was already something that I had coded beforehand. Seeing the first software work, I nodded my head. This was the only software I had to tweak. The others were already in place. This process took no longer than 10 minutes, and I was soon finished with it. Later, I should have been happy, and yet something is missing. I couldn't quite put it into words. The game was better in almost every single aspect. The graphics had improved, some of the storyline had been refined, the lag had been reduced, and everything in general was better. But it's not enough. I felt like there was still more that I could add to this game. But what exactly could I add? What could I? Later, my eyes fell on the app once again as I put the developer system to the side. I looked through my stats window, and then my gaze fell on a certain anomaly. Mr. Jingles. Later, my mind raced. And then, can that work? The idea of using my own anomalies for my works had always crossed my mind. For example, I had always thought of making use of the conductor in order to create music, that would fit each one of my games. Granted, the conductor would become my anomaly. As things stood, I was more likely to become a part of its audience than anything else. While it is true that Mr. Jingles is only granting me 2 chances to hypnotize people, that shouldn't include games, right? Or do the anchors need to be real-life items? I drummed my fingers over the table before summoning the clown. The room turned cold as its figure appeared right before me, and my expression tensed slightly. However, trying my best to remain calm, I asked about what I was thinking. "Do you think it's possible?" Mr. Jingles remained quiet. The silence felt pressuring. But then, nod. The clown nodded and my eyes lit up. Really, in that case? Degree hypnosis, low. HM. I paused for a moment and looked at the clown. Why was its voice so robotic? It was almost as if it was struggling to speak. Is it because of the strength difference between the two of us? Most of its strength is reduced because of me. That made sense. Mile was also struggling to use her full strength. In that case, you say the degree is low, but is it possible? The clown nodded again. Later. I sat in silence while my mind churned. I was trying my best to keep myself from becoming excited. If it were truly possible, and I could implement Mr. Jingles into the game, then it would really catapult it to the next level. But there were still a couple of things that I needed to take into consideration. One, synergy with the game. The hypnosis needed to synergize with the game. Be it the storyline and the hypnosis. I couldn't just add it for the sake of adding it. 2, Mr. Jingles' involvement couldn't be big. With the section chief present, I couldn't risk making it a big part of the game. There'd be a high chance he'd find something strange about it if that were the case. I had to make its involvement subtle, even if the game protected Mr. Jingles from being discovered. It was just so that I could play it on the safe side. There was still one thing that bothered me. Unlike the recording that doesn't require the conductor, this might require Mr. Jingles' attention. This might not be sustainable if the game is played by tens of thousands of people. The thought made me frown deeply. For now, I wasn't too bothered by this aspect. My main focus was the upcoming demonstration, but this was something I'd need to consider once the multiplayer update rolled out. All right. Massaging my face and looking at the clown, I sighed to myself. Help me out this time. The people that I'm trying to impress are the ones who have the best chance of helping me get into the BAU. We can't mess this up. Later. The clown simply stood in silence. But that silence spoke volumes as I quickly started to get to work. I didn't have much time. There was only 1 day left until the deadline, but this was enough. What I was going to add was nothing too big. And as the hours passed and the next day came, a notification appeared before my vision. No, this isn't enough. Pursing my lips, I stared at my laptop before eventually opening the software shop. After a while, I clenched my teeth and purchased a new software. Fuck it. I then proceeded to install it into the game. This is good, IHM. Ding! A notification flashed, causing me to freeze. A Twisted Game 2.5. By the time I snapped out of it, my breath couldn't help but pause. I did it. The game. It had finally reached the next level. New recruits rolled in every couple of months into the guild. This was mainly due to the high turnover rate and high mortality rate. Incidents occurred, and the job wasn't one where safety was guaranteed. This was one of the main reasons why the containment department was lagging behind most of the other departments. The mortality rate of the containment department was the highest by far. This wasn't surprising. Unlike the containment department, the other departments dealt with more linear and predictable situations, resulting in significantly lower risks. Additionally, their larger budgets allowed them to afford superior safety equipment. Anomalies were anything but predictable. Most of them couldn't even be brute forced into clearing like the other departments. It was for this exact reason that the mortality rate was so high. Is everything set up? The new recruits should be coming soon. They're an extremely talented batch. I spent quite a bit of time trying to get them. A man stood with both hands clasped behind his back, his expression relaxed. A top hat sat neatly atop his head, matching the black coat draped over his shoulders as he strolled into the containment department. Standing next to him was the section chief. I'm not sure, to be honest. As far as I'm aware, the preparations should be done soon. I see. The man didn't say anything and just looked around. As he walked into the department, nobody took notice of his presence. It was as if he were completely invisible to the eyes of everyone present. I'm rather curious about this new system. I've checked the game myself, but it doesn't look particularly scary. However, I'll trust your judgment and see if it's truly worth investing in. Yes. The section chief nodded. Truthfully, he wasn't confident. He had wanted to get someone to try the game before him so that he could confirm whether it worked or not. However, he had simply been too busy to do so. In the end, the day that the new recruits arrived was here, and there was no longer time for him to do any checking. Especially when Guild Master, this way. The section chief suddenly pointed towards a room where the two of them entered. Clank. Upon entering the room, they were met with the sight of numerous desks, each enclosed by tall temporary partitions that prevented any direct line of sight between occupants. Every desk was equipped with multiple monitors, each hooked up to a headset. Standing not far from the desks was a certain figure. He merely glanced at them before nodding. Hello. That was all he said before going back to work. The section chief's face twitched for a moment, and just as he was about to speak, a hand stopped up. When he looked to his right, he saw the guild master shake his head, as his gaze was firmly focused on Seth, who looked extremely concentrated on whatever he was doing. Leave him be. I'm growing more and more curious about this entire thing. I understand. Unaware of what he had just done, Seth's gaze remained fixed on his laptop. He was busy playing solitaire. Everything had already been set up at the moment. There was not much else that he needed to do. However, taking into account just how important this entire thing was, he couldn't help but feel nervous. This was why he chose to play solitaire. It was to calm his nerves down. No, this doesn't work, this also doesn't. It was right as things were starting to get complicated that the door to the room opened again. Slowly turning his head, Seth's expression paused. Then, closing down his laptop, he looked at the section chief and the man standing next to him. It looks like we can begin. The new recruits were here. The new recruits all entered at the same time. There were 10 in total. They filtered into the room without a word, the soft thuds of their footsteps the only sound that came out from them. Some moved with confidence, others with some hesitation. All of them wore the same black suits with the guild emblem near the top of their right chest. They took in the setup, rows of enclosed desks, each with multiple monitors and a single waiting headset. Seth didn't look up from his laptop. He sat before the monitors in a separate desk. However, he could feel the confusion in their faces. The section chief gestured vaguely. Take your seats, this will be a new testing method that we've adopted. The recruits complied. One recruit, tall, broad-shouldered, bushy brows, sat first, his body barely fitting in on the desk. Pausing, a young woman with clipped silver hair and sharp, piercing blue eyes looked at the man before moving to another seat. Hey, that's mine. It just so happened that another hand had reached for the seat. It belonged to a bubbly-looking girl with shoulder-length brown hair and a fairly endowed body. Joanna slowly turned her head and stared at the bubbly girl. Then her gaze lowered and her eyes narrowed. Mia stepped back, somewhat frightened by the woman's face. In the end, she took the seat next to the bulky man. The interaction was brief, but it was all caught by Seth, who was undecided between shaking his head and sighing. His eyes swept over the 10 of them. He closed his laptop and stood up. All right. His voice was calm, and so was his expression. I can understand the confusion that everyone has regarding the current situation, so I'll explain it for all of you. I won't be repeating myself. Seth carefully moved towards an empty desk that had been set up with everything in advance, and he pointed at it. The tension in the room unknowingly rose. But only for a brief moment. "So all of you will be playing a game." Following his next words, the faces of the new trainees changed. "Did you say we're going to play a game?" "I didn't hear wrong, right?" That, games, we are going to play games." There was understandable confusion in the room. Seth raised his hand and the noise ceased. "Yes, you will be playing a game. It is one that has been set up to train the trainees. There will be 2 teams of 5. Each team will communicate through the headsets. The cubicles have been put in place in order to stop you from looking at each other. The game is a rather simple one, and all you have to do is clear it." Seth calmly explained the rules of the game to all the trainees. They all listened in silence, but... "Is this real?" One of the trainees, a man with short brown hair and blue eyes, turned his attention towards the section chief. He stood up from his seat. "I rejected several offers from King-grade guilds, with offers that were a lot more lucrative than this, expecting to have a good career, and yet I come to see this. What sort of nonsense is this? Since when did recruitment turn into this?" The trainee pointed at the weird setup in front of him. He found the entire situation to be a joke. He was someone who had graduated in the top 100 in Newton Academy, one of the most prestigious academies in Andorra. Hell, he had even gotten a direct offer from the BAU. The only reason he had rejected such offers was that this guild looked the most promising. "And yet, I don't want to take part in this nonsense. It's a massive waste of time. I'd rather..." "The door is right there." The section chief pointed at the door while yawning. He looked completely unbothered by the trainees' protests while leaning back on his chair. On the other hand, the man who stood next to the section chief just smiled. "It's just a game. It'll at most take 10 minutes to play. Since you joined this guild, you naturally know about us. We're not going to let you do something that we don't believe in. Just play the game. It's..." "I'd rather not." The trainee cut the section chief off, prompting the section chief to raise his brow. Before the section chief could get any word out, the trainee grabbed his bag and stood up. "I've seen enough. If the guild has sunk so low that it's training its recruits with video games, non-virtual ones at that, then I know exactly what kind of standards this place holds. As per the clause, I'll be terminating my contract due to dissatisfaction." And with that, the ex-trainee left the room. Silence ensued shortly after as the section chief looked around. "Well, is anyone else unsatisfied with the current arrangement? If you wish to leave, then you can do so now. I won't stop you." A brief silence followed his words. "But then, I wish to leave. I don't think my goals align with the goals of this guild." "The same goes for me." "Me too." Before the section chief knew it, 3 more people stood up. Staring at them, the section chief felt a small pang in his heart. All 3 of them were highly sought-after recruits they had to fight tooth and nail in order to recruit. And just like this, they all left. "No, I can't let them leave. This would be too much of a waste." The section chief was just about to stop them when a hand pressed against his shoulder. Turning back, he saw the guild master stare at him with a smile before shaking his head. "But, let them leave." The section chief really wanted to disobey his order, but in the end, he could only sigh while holding onto his chest. He was really feeling the pain. Thankfully, it only stopped at 4. There were still 6 recruits who decided to stay. 4 girls and 2 boys. "It looks like we'll have to make some adjustments to the teams." Seth took over them, seemingly looking completely unbothered by the situation. To some extent, he was unbothered. He had already foreseen something like this happening from the start. The real issue came from the man standing beside the section chief. Just who in the world was he? And how did he manage to convince the section chief to let them go? He doesn't look like the guild master, but it could be a disguise. Seth's eyes narrowed. In the end, however, he stopped caring and focused his attention on the remaining recruits as he loaded up the game for all 6 of them. The loading screen soon showed up, looking completely different from the past. It looked quite good now. This game requires teamwork and communication. Since there are 6 of you, you'll be split into 2 teams. I'll announce the pairings shortly. Once your names are called, initiate a server and join the game. Seth paused while looking at the trainees as they followed his instructions. When all teams are ready and hit start, the session will begin. Your objective is simple: clear the game and don't react. Pausing once more, Seth's eyes narrowed. The moment you do, you lose. Are we really going to be playing a game on our first day? The trainees all started to wonder the same thing as they stared at the monitor in front of them. They were somewhat baffled by the current situation, but unlike the trainees who had just left, they didn't really have the ability to leave at will. To them, this guild was the best that they could find. While they were talented, their talents still fell short of the elites from Andorra. I will call the teams now. Seth's even voice echoed within the room as he took out a small notepad and started to recite the names of the teams. Team 1, Min, Mia, and Joanna. He paused. Team 2, Neil, Nora, and Sarah. Putting the notepad down, he looked around the room. These will be the teams. You can immediately start creating the servers and join in. Don't create any aliases, just use your real name. Following his words, the 6 members all followed his instructions and created 2 servers. The respective members joined. Hello. A soft voice suddenly whispered into the game. It was a somewhat cheerful voice. Can anybody hear me, Hielo? Will you stop that? Joanna suddenly spoke, trying her best to keep it together. She wasn't exactly in the best of moods. This was a massive opportunity for her. Unlike the others, she didn't come directly from the academies, but rather she used to be a recruit of another Queen Grade guild. She decided to make the jump when she saw no hope of rising up further. But looking at the situation right before her, she couldn't help but feel gloomy. I didn't make a mistake, right? Hello? Another voice entered the communication. The voice was incredibly soft. Joanna spoke. I take it that you're the 3rd member of the team. Yes. Okay. He doesn't seem like much of a talker. She took note of that and looked around the page until her gaze fell on the start button. Is everyone ready? I will be starting soon. I'm ready. Me too. Okay. And with that, Joanna pressed on the play button. Even though she didn't have many expectations for the experience, she still planned on doing her best. Since she had already burned her old bridges, she had no other choice but to try her best. The screen flashed before changing. Flick! An old house appeared before their view. Immediately, a faint static sound echoed in their ears. It was faint, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Wow, this is not bad. Hee, I like this. Zion. Besides Mia, Joanna and Min remained quiet. Joanna was somewhat taken aback by the faint static sound in the background, feeling that it was trying to dig its way into her mind. Min, on the other hand, was just quiet by nature. The surroundings were dim, and one could barely see too much ahead. However, at first glance, the graphics of the game weren't too bad. Joanna could notice subtle details about the place that were interesting. It was also in that moment that a light flickered in the distance. Flick! It started as a small ball, one that slowly inched its way, accompanied by a faint creaking sound. The 3 looked in the direction of the light until... I thought you wouldn't have come, officers. An old lady appeared. Her voice was strained, and her eyes had a faint shade of light blue, almost as if to appear as though she were blind. NN, what the hell is this? She's so damn creepy. Mia, of course, had to make a comment. Joanna, on the other hand, narrowed her eyes at the sight of the old lady. Looking at her, she didn't feel much at all. She looked realistic and all, with the graphics being quite good, but this was far from scary. I have been waiting quite a while. I was starting to get impatient. Her lips slowly pulled up to reveal her toothless smile. It hasn't been long since my husband disappeared. Perhaps you might be able to find some clues if you look inside. I am happy to be of your assistance. Basic instructions on how to play the game were provided after. This is quite simple. It is. Joanna's eyes narrowed when seeing just how simple the game looked. Although her disappointment increased, she didn't show it and looked around. Seth's voice echoed shortly after. If you've already started the game, then you don't need any more instructions from me. You'll figure things out as you go. And Seth paused. Don't react, that's all you have to do. Joanna quietly pursed her lips, as if she'd react. Let's go. I believe the first thing we should do is enter the room up ahead. Given the composition of her squad, it was up to her to take the lead. Mia was the first to rush forward. It looked like she had no ounce of fear in her. Wow, look at this. This place sure looks creepy. The first room appeared to be a kitchen. It was quite worn down, with the marble floor cracked and several open cabinets that creaked faintly in the background. Looking around the room, it didn't take long for them to find the first letter. Even I write better than this, still creepy. Mia commented while staring at the letter. Though her words seemed to indicate that she found the situation creepy, her tone suggested otherwise. It almost felt as though she found the situation amusing. Joanna sighed and put the letter away. Let's go to the next room, it looks like we have to. She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes had caught something in the corner of the room, and as she froze, the others did too, slowly turning to see what had drawn her gaze. That. Joanna's eyes squinted. Was that there before? She tried to think if she had seen it before or not. But regardless of how hard she tried, she couldn't think at all. Moving towards the top hat, she picked it up, but other than that, she wasn't able to do anything else with it. Maybe it's a decoration. Maybe. Joanna replied, her actual head turning in Mia's direction, but pausing when she saw the tall wall of the cubicle. Putting the hat back down, she decided to go to the next room. The others followed. They didn't think much of the situation from that point. However, what all three didn't notice was the sudden flickering of their eyes. They soon entered the next room. They found a letter there, too, alongside a black coat and an older record player that played a creepy tune for them. They really couldn't afford to buy a proper sound engineer. What is this? My ears are starting to hurt. What the hell? The bathroom was next. Everything had been relatively smooth up to that point. Neither of the three noticed anything wrong with the game. But it was also at the exact moment that they entered the bathroom that something about the environment seemed to shift. The shadows on the walls stretched, their minds grew in number, and something slowly seemed to seep into their minds, slowly caressing them with its soft hands. Their changes didn't go unnoticed. At least not to Seth, as his lips curled. It was too late now. The game had already pulled their minds in. The fun part is about to start soon. It was hard to explain. However, the moment they entered the bathroom, it was as if something around them had shifted. Joanna subconsciously licked her lips as she looked around her. Broken tiles littered the floor, crunching faintly beneath each step. The shower curtains hung in torn, stained strips, gently swaying though no breeze stirred the air. And then, there was the tub. A hulking shell of porcelain, fractured with several cracks. Dark stains ringed its rim, and from deep within the basin came a slow, deliberate drip that echoed through the silence. Drip, drip. Every sound seemed magnified in that moment. The crunch of their steps on broken tiles. The slow, rhythmic creak of the cupboard door above the sink, swaying on rusted hinges. And then, the sound of their own breath. Not their characters, their breath. They could hear everything. Silence filtered across the room as the three looked around the place. They looked for the same arrows that usually indicated where the letter would be. But, NN, I'm not seeing any arrows, do you? I don't. Joanna shook while she looked at Min. He was ever quiet, but his silence indicated that he had also not found a thing. The three paused, unable to understand what they were supposed to do. But then, crack. A sharp, piercing sound echoed across the room. Zay. All three turned their heads. It was there that they noticed the mirror glass shattering, words manifesting in the mirror when they weren't there before. For a moment, Joanna felt her breath growing more shallow. But that was only for a brief moment. From shallow to pausing. Just after glimpsing the letters scrawled across the mirror, she caught sight of a pair of hollow eyes in its corner, Her hand tensed, almost imperceptibly, as she flicked the mouse toward the eyes. A bright light filtered across the room shortly after. The other two froze. HM. The old lady appeared again. How interesting. The old lady muttered, staring at the mirror in front of her. This wasn't here before. How strange, how very strange. Her voice was hoarse, and as she slowly turned her head, her gaze paused on the three individually. But then, it paused on a certain individual. It was Mia. Her wrinkles moved, and her face cracked into a smile. And then, she spoke, her voice changing, sounding more robotic. More sinister. Oh my, I startled you. I didn't mean to do that. Huh. Hearing Mia's startled voice, Joanna blinked her eyes. Why was she reacting this way? Did something? Why you can hear me? Joanna paused in that moment. Men too. Both turned to look at Mia's character. Although they couldn't see her directly, they could see the subtle trembling of her character's head. Was her hand trembling? Oh my, am I disturbing you, officers? The old lady put on a surprised expression, her face turning away from Mia. I was just curious about the investigation. I do apologize for that. I will quickly move out of your way. Holding onto her lamp, she slowly moved out of the door. The three followed her back as she left the door, and the darkness swallowed her retreating back. As the silence extended, Mia let out a strained chuckle. I really thought she could hear me. It was probably some stupid coincidence. HM. Joanna shook her head. For a moment, she had her a little bit tense. Let's get out of this room. We've cleared the first floor. Taking one last look at the letters on the wall, she quietly mumbled, "Don't look," to herself before leaving. The three met the old lady again, and after a brief interaction with her, they moved towards the second floor. Tracing the old lady's back, Joanna's eyes narrowed. For how long is she going to appear? It's not long, dear. Say. Her hands stopped, and so did her breath. We don't have long until we reach the second floor. Age is slowly catching up to me, Is everything okay? Hearing Mia's voice, evidently noticing something wrong with her, Joanna opened her mouth, but then closed it as she moved the mouse up and down. They finally reached the second floor. The moment they did, a certain tension seemed to hang in the surroundings. Almost as if someone was watching them. Their breathing grew more shallow. In that moment, all three forgot about the fact that this was a game, and their eyes narrowed. Joanna was the most experienced one in the group, and so she was able to remain relatively calm. Yes. It's not really, I'm not okay, this is weird. Hearing the comments from the two, Joanna looked at Mia, who was the first to enter the next room. And then, this. Mia's voice caught Joanna's attention as she entered. It was also in that moment that she made a similar sound. It's the room. Why is the place so clean? Is the old lady only taking care of the second floor? Indeed, looking at the second floor first apartment, the place was a lot cleaner. The room looked like a bedroom, and the general vibe looked a lot better than before. And yet, despite the cleanliness, for some reason, the place felt even more unsettling than the lower floors. Keep a check on your surroundings. Let's look for the next part of the task. The three got to work. Joanna started searching the place, looking through every cupboard and side that she could find. As she was looking, her gaze couldn't help but fall on a certain frame that rested by the nightstand. She slowly reached out for it and grabbed it. She couldn't make out what was in the picture frame, it was too dusty. Positioning the cursor over it, she clicked. The frame lifted into view, and only when it was close did she manage to peer through the film of dust and smudges clouding the glass. A young girl and a man. Inside the frame, a young man stood beside a little girl in front of a house. Both faced the camera, smiling faintly, posed like any ordinary family snapshot. There was nothing overtly strange about it, just a regular photo. And yet, Joanna's eyes kept drifting to the man's clothing. A grey suit and a matching grey top hat. Something about it unsettled her. The longer she stared, the faster her heart began to race. Those clothes. She was familiar with them. She had. Creak. A creaking sound echoed, and everyone paused. Something was here. Joanna kept her cool, recalling the previous words from before. Let's go to the next room. Keep your eyes peeled to the floor. Remember the previous words from before. Don't look. Slowly turning her head, her hand paused as she saw a pair of leather shoes. However, she quickly dismissed them and moved on to the next room alongside the others. But it was right as they entered the next room that they saw it. The next words sprawled across the floor in red. Everything is a lie. I am not sick, they are sick. They try to trick me, they trick me through sight and sound. Run! Run! All three paused. And then, creak. A soft, drawn-out creaking sound suddenly echoed, like weight shifting on old wood. It came from behind them. A chill stabbed down their spine, and every muscle in their body locked up. Joanna's fingers clenched tighter around the mouse. Then a voice broke the silence. Oh, you're here, did you find anything? It was the old lady. But, whatever you do, don't look. Joanna rushed the words out, already understanding what was happening. Her entire palm sweaty and her body trembling subtly. Don't look, it's a trick. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.